Last presentation from WECC. I know most of you have a full day tomorrow as well, but we're really excited to wrap up the WECC portion. Josh has promised this will be fun. Yeah, and he wants some entity interaction in this. So the title is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So this is your opportunity to hear things that went really well, things that didn't go so well, things that we can do better. And I've had a lot of opportunities to talk to you. Kim, Jimmy, and I do what we call a listening session after entity engagements, and we get a lot of feedback on the good, bad, and the ugly. And so I think this is an opportunity for all of you to get involved in the good, bad, and the ugly. So I'm going to hand it over to Josh. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Deb. Good afternoon to everybody. All right, let me log into the computer here. I took some notes. I just got to remember my password. Does anybody know it? Who said password? You get free candy. All right, we just came off of a break. I know everybody is probably excited to get on your flights back home and get out of this nice cold weather that we have here in Arizona, or prepare for your WECC meeting tomorrow. But before that, I just want to start off. Can you guys kind of humor me and let's do an exercise together as a Western interconnection? All right. Oh, yes, here we go. All right, if you can, scoot to the very front of your seat. Scoot to the very front of your seat. Really good posture. Really good posture. All right, that's the first part. Here's the second part. I need you to take a deep breath in, a deep breath out. All right, now that I have you on the edge of your seats and breathless, let's get to this actual presentation. When I was asked to present at this workshop, I was absolutely certain somebody was going to ask me to talk about SIP 8. I was shocked to learn that the topic was the good, bad, and ugly of audits. So I asked Maylee, can you give me some specific guidance on what they're looking for? Maylee was kind enough to tell me, not so many words, this is your opportunity to be creative. I thought, well, left-handed people are supposed to be creative, so this should be pretty easy. As I prepared for this panel, I realized creativity must be a recessive gene, and I'm about as creative as a standardized test. So instead of creating a PowerPoint presentation, I thought about an interpretive dance. Then the realization came that I have 2 left feet, and the only thing that would be more entertaining is watching grass grow or paint dry. So the only option I had was to seek some assistance from 2 hard-working women from Arizona Public Service and El Paso Electric. Yes, please. Joining me to talk today about the good, the bad, the ugly, Stephanie Little from APS and Maite Luna from EPE. Before we kick things off, I'd like to do just a quick introduction here. Give you a little bit of background. For those that don't know me, my name is Joshua Rowe. I'm a senior auditor on the high inherent risk team under Tom Williams. I joined WECC in 2018 after retiring from the United States Marine Corps. Throughout my career, I served many roles. Thank you. To all the veterans, not me. Thank you. I served in a variety of roles as a military police officer, criminal investigator, and a physical security specialist. During this time, I had an opportunity to work all over the world, but the most exciting thing for me was working at the Pentagon. I worked for 4.5 years. I worked as the senior enlisted advisor to the Deputy Commandant of Plans, Policies, and Operations at the Pentagon, where I was fortunate enough to learn a lot about physical security, but I also got augmented to serve as an auditor for the Department of Defense and the Marine Corps Inspector General's office. This was a great opportunity because not only did I write the policy, I got to go audit the policy. That was kind of cool. So when I joined WECC, I was like, oh, this is great. I get to audit policy. I can't wait to rewrite it. Oh, wait, I can't. So the closest thing I can do is join standard drafting team 220205, SIP 8. So that's a little bit about me. If we can, let's do some quick introductions of the panel here. Stephanie, if we can.
No. Oh, okay, sorry. Stephanie Little with Arizona Public Service. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, so it's good to see everybody this week. I've been at APS for about 15 years. Been in regulatory the entire time, but only in the NERC space for about the last 10 years. I started on the state side and quickly found out that was not my love. So I moved on and now I'm over here on NERC and enjoy that much more. So I am the manager of NERC Regulatory Affairs for APS. That consists of a team of regulatory compliance personnel, as well as a dedicated team for internal controls for all things NERC. So it's great to be here local. We were able to get our whole team out here. So if you've ever wanted to know anything from anyone at APS, there's a ton of people here that you can ask. So happy to be here and participate.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate that. Maite, over to you.
So my name is Maite Luna and I'm with El Paso Electric. We'll refer to it as EPE. It's a lot easier. I am a compliance specialist on the SIP side with the team, and I've been in my role for 2.5 years. Been with the company for 10 years, and so my background is more of accounting, HR. I feel still new, even though it's 2.5 years, and I'm still getting comfortable being uncomfortable in this space. So glad to be here sharing this opportunity with Stephanie and Josh.
Thank you, Maite. See, you're not nervous. You're natural. So as much as I would like to stand up here and give you specific examples of the good, the bad, and the ugly, I give you guys an opportunity here. Does anybody want to talk about the ugly? Has anybody had an ugly audit? No. You want to hear about it? The auditors didn't show up. Wait, that's the bad? Who said that? All right, look, I want to spin it in a little bit different direction. I want to talk about fostering positive relationships of trust and confidence and ensuring that our efforts directly lead to the reliability and security of the bulk electric system. This discussion will allow us an opportunity to identify good practices, eliminate bad experiences, and prevent ugly situations. That hinders our overarching goal. In sum, I want it to be a collaborative approach to identifying what we've done that works, what we can do better, and how we can ensure that we're on the same page as the audit experience kicks off. And so what I'd like to do now is talk about what is a good audit experience. I'm going to throw out a couple of terms, and please, this is where I ask for your participation. If there's other adjectives that I've missed, please throw them out there. I'm happy to know that Tom has trained me to learn what an adjective is, but I'm still struggling with dangling modifiers. When I think about a good audit, I think about collaboration, transparency, effective communication, value add. This one might be a little sensitive, but I'm going to say it anyway. Healthy debates. I think that is what makes a good audit engagement. It's not no finding. That's wonderful from an organizational perspective and from a reliability and security perspective. But does that make a good audit engagement is just not having a finding? No. We want to learn from each other. We want to work together to do these things. Anything I missed? Anybody else want to throw out one of those positive attributes of a good audit? Hearing none, I guess your spot checks all go out tomorrow. We'll create our own good environment. Communication is good. It's back and forth. It's bi-directional communication. We can't just give you all of the information. You can't just give us all of the information. We have to be able to digest it between both organizations so we understand what we're talking about. When I hear about a bad audit, though, I hear confusion. There's errors. There's poorly worded documentation, or there's unplanned or unexplained changes. That's what I think of when we talk about a bad audit experience. Anybody want to help with a bad experience? Assumptions. Great, thank you, Fod. Tight deadlines. Or anybody know the term that I use when I talk about tight deadlines? What verbiage I use? Those that have been with me for quite some time. Draconian deadlines. That's what I use. Yeah, I got to find a new word. When I hear of ugly audits, I think of conflict or a misrepresentation. And something that Stephanie brought up to me when we were preparing for this panel was unknown outcomes. What happens after? We could leave you with an ugly situation if you don't know what happens next. So throughout this presentation, I want to kind of talk through some of this and give some examples of good things and talk about what WECC is doing to get a little bit better at delivering a value-added audit experience. So since joining WECC in 2018, I've had the opportunity to participate in over 60 audit engagements. One of them, or each one of them, is a little bit different than the other, but it provides us with an opportunity to grow together. And I can say that my audit experiences have drastically improved since 2018. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes and give you some specific examples. But Stephanie, I'd like to kind of start with you on this one. Can you describe your experience with audit engagements?
Sure. So I've been while at APS through 3 WECC audits. So most recently last month. So I've got some recent thoughts on the subject. But our most recent engagement just last month with Tom and Josh and others was really good. It was very positive. A lot of the, words you're throwing out there, collaborative, effective communication, those really came into play. I will say that it is different than it was 3 audits ago. I've seen changes in how we prepare for an audit, and I've seen a lot of changes in how WECC shows up for an audit. So it was really good. I felt very comfortable reaching out if I had questions, which I did. We often, kind of chat amongst ourselves as a team, and when we start guessing what WECC might be asking for, that's when we pause and we're like, let's get on a call with them because it does us no good to spin. And they were very open to taking those calls and answering those questions. So it was a very positive engagement for us. We appreciated the, openness from the team. So far, sorry, Josh, I might paint you in a corner on this one, but on a Friday midday, we wrapped up an interview and you were nice enough to tell us, we're not going to send you anything else over the weekend. So we kind of could release our SMEs for the weekend and know we didn't need to be, on the edge of our seats to kind of be waiting for things to come in. So that was very much appreciated. So yeah, really positive from our perspective. And I would say comfortable, the tone feels a little bit more comfortable to be able to just have open dialogue, which is really, really good. So some, great changes, I think, on all sides of things and enjoyed being able to get through that in a really positive way.
I appreciate the responses. This is not a soapbox for Josh. Please don't take it that way. But that relationship didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like the notice of audit package went out and I was the ATL and we were having a great conversation. We've built this relationship over the last 4 to 5 years. I had the privilege of being their audit team lead in 2020, well, what year is it? 2021 or 2022? 22 in December. We had an opportunity to meet each other. I got to know the subject matter experts. I get to see the subject matter experts and build those relationships to where we can have those conversations. But it actually started at the RNS workshop. We did the dine around and Stephanie decided that she wanted to come to my dine around and we got to know each other. We got to establish that ATL PCC relationship on a little bit more personal basis rather than just, hi, welcome to the Teams meeting and we're glad you're here. That's one of those positive interactions where we can foster that and grow from it. So Mike, I'd be kind of curious on yours. We had a similar experience with that. I got to meet you on a spot check before we had an audit engagement. Can you give me a little bit of background on your experience with audits?
Yes, so absolutely. It sounds very similar. Obviously, my experience is coming more from a newcomer approach, and I wasn't exactly sure what to expect going into the first audit engagement. How is the collaboration between EPE and the auditors? Is your relationship already established? Are the same auditors coming out? What's the process? What's the structure? And so I definitely agree and feel that lunch was a hot topic, I think, when I came on board during audit year. And I feel that we took that opportunity to have lunch with the auditors, and that definitely paved the way and opened up the communication channels. It was not necessarily the lunch itself, right? We got to sit in a not so formal setting, still with our audit hats on, maintained our professionalism, But we got to know each other a little better, and it just felt more comfortable. We felt at ease. We were able to relieve some of that stress and anxiety that comes with the audit. And so I definitely feel the partnership was established then and there, going into it. And we've taken that away also in non-audit years. I mean, our approach to the WECC technical advisors and reaching out to you guys has definitely been different, and we weren't as keen on taking that approach before.
Yes, the audience, just real quick, to show of hands, the last few years we've started doing this. I call it breaking bread with the entity. If you've, it's true, we actually started this. Brenda, I'm going to use you as an example. The first time I asked, hey, schedule a lunch during a site visit and we can all break bread together. We had some observers and they were like, this is the greatest thing that we've seen. And Brenda was like, can we actually have lunch with the regulators? Yeah, we can. And we did. And with the Cafe Zupas, I had a wonderful experience and got to know the subject matter experts there. So I wanted to poll the audience. Since we started doing this, outside of an RNS workshop or any kind of a workshop where we get together like this, how many have had the opportunity during site visits to break bread with the auditors, included? You start to see different hands come up. WECC auditors, you're more than welcome to raise your hands as well. It's something that we're starting to do. We're starting to build those pieces in there because it's important that we establish the relationship. Yes, we're the regulator. Yes, we're going to call balls and strikes. But at the same time, we're all human beings and we have to have an opportunity to grow together. If I asked these questions to the panelists 7 to 8 years ago, my guess is the responses of how was your audit experience might be a little bit different. You're not going to hear those positive attributes of open dialogue, open communication, partnership. You may have heard some phrases such as rigid or differences of opinion or differences of interpretation or WECC versus us. That's just some of the audits that were described to me as I started, that it wasn't going to be collaborative. I mentioned earlier that my experiences have drastically improved. I want to kind of paint some of my background of what I'm used to and how this has been an awesome thing to grow with the folks. When I was with the Inspector General's office, we used to send our notices of audit 72 hours in advance. And we would bring a team of 25 people onto their site, no matter where it was, and we would audit on about 60 to 70 different programs that are federally mandated with 72 hours notice. We would send that notification on Friday night. Now you wonder why. It's because we didn't want to see painted rocks. We wanted to see actual operations. We wanted to see how things were functioning. It was strictly compliance. I didn't care about internal controls. I didn't ask about a risk assessment. I didn't do anything. I needed to know, did you have a 7-foot cinder block wall with a 1-foot top guard of barbed wire, single strand, and it was monitored by a camera? That's the only thing I needed to know. But if I gave them 270 days notice, somebody's going to be constructing a wall. Unless we have budget cuts, then we're going to be standing there. So there's two differences. That's the background I came from, was that no notice inspection audit to now we're working with entities well in advance. You're knowing your scope well in advance, and we're going to be on site performing those activities together. So going from good to bad, when it comes to interviews, I want to talk about interviews. And WECC auditors that are listening, yes, this is directed at us as well. We have to get better. And I want to talk through another experience here. And I promise you, I have a panel that's going to answer some questions. When I participated in my first WECC audit, I was given a bunch of templates: interview request, request for information, or data requests, and RSOL write-ups. These tools, they were given to me for a standard and requirement. And I remember I wrote my first interview request and I sent it to the audit team members to QA/QC it. And the first thing I was told was, you can't modify the template. Wish I could see the puzzled look on my face, because how can I not modify something that I want to ask a question about? And so, show of hands again, how many remember getting an interview request? Insert your own standard and requirement here that said, and I quote, the audit team requests an interview with the entity SIP6 MEs, period. We see some hands. Okay, let's change it to fact 4, fact 8. Any more hands go up there? Okay, yeah, insert the standards. If you think about it, we did you no justice. We did not add value to the audit engagement. Sure, it set the time and the date that WECC would like to meet with your SMEs, but it provided no insight on what was to be discussed. So how does this support the good? And WECC auditors, this is where I will call us out. This was a failure on our part. We did not do you, the entities, justice by giving you a data request or an interview request with insufficient information. And I will apologize for that, but we're going to get better. We're going to talk about some of the better things here. But let's ask ourselves the question, what could we have done better? And before anybody shouts, provide the questions in advance. Let's look at it from a little myopic level here. We should have identified a synopsis and some discussion points, asset types, some reference documents, documentation, maybe some specific information that would help us ensure that the right people are in the interview that need to be there. That's one of those things where we can have an interview on SIP 5, but if we don't have your EMS folks there, then how are we going to talk about electronic security perimeters? We're not going to be able to, because we didn't say provide the appropriate SMEs. We didn't give you the discussion points in advance. And so we have to get better with those requests. Now, I'm going to ask a couple questions here. First, Stephanie, I'm going to start with you. You have a phenomenal process for preparing for an interview. As we discussed about it, I was just baffled of how much time you spend preparing your SMEs and the folks that are going to participate in your audit for this. I want to know, though, how do you dissect the information from an interview request? How do you determine the appropriate personnel that should participate? And do you do anything to rehearse internally for an interview?
Sure. So for your first part, how do we know who to include? So we have all the time, we know our assignments for our standards at a basic level, right? So for whatever standard you are having questions for, we have our general assignments. When we get our scope, that's actually when we talk to our SMEs and say, we know there's going to be some interviews. So who are you going to potentially need in the room with you? We know we're going to want you, but that's just where we start. So what support personnel might you need if they start asking about controls or risk or other things? Are you comfortable to be answering all those questions? How long has that SME been with us? Are they maybe new and they need some support? Or on the flip side, maybe they've been here a really long time and they're training someone up. So maybe they want someone to learn, right? So we kind of do our selection for interviews very early on, and then we prepare all those folks, and then we can modify a bit, right? When we get the request directly, and we can say, okay, that's the right personnel. Maybe we don't need that person. We tend to over plan than under plan. So we're kind of, ready. If we think anyone's going to need to be in the room, we train them. And then we call upon those once we get the more detailed information. So that's kind of how we select. And then we do start interviewee training well in months in advance. We do kind of a basic training on etiquette and just how to, your body language and different things like that. A lot of folks maybe haven't been through an interview before, so we just kind of want to prepare them for what to expect. And then we do full mock interviews. We actually select personnel from either the compliance group or other departments who maybe have some subject matter expertise. We prepare questions in advance. We do our best to guess using the RSAW and the ICD-CT and things like that of, hey, you might get asked these things. It's a really valuable tool for us. And our SMEs, even from this last audit, said it's great for them because they can kind of get the jitters out a little bit, right? They can mess up and feel like they're in a safe space. And it gets them ready to really think about, oh, I need to think about how to answer that, right? Because they know their stuff, but it's different to know what you're doing and then to have to sit down and explain it to somebody. So it's a really great opportunity for them to kind of have a live action, practice run at it, if you will. And then during the interviews themselves, we provide regulatory support in the room and we give them all the materials that they might need. We prepare packets for them that says, here's your RSAW, any RFIs that came in, all the evidence we've provided. And if you want to refer to anything, you just let us know. We'll get it on the screen for you so that you can talk to it, so that they can just really stay engaged in the conversation.
You guys put a lot of work into it. I will say, my take, anything you guys do differently at El Paso Electric? Anything you'd like to add on?
I think different on the mock audit is we don't perform it internally. We're actually fortunate enough to hire consultants that come on board, and we push ourselves and ask for a harsher audit, in particular for the interviews, to prepare our teams. And we bring our starting lineup, we bring our bench, and we definitely have observers on there. And so I think that's definitely been beneficial. We've seen that transpire positive onto our actual audit. And we actually practice the caucus as well. We always want to reiterate that opportunity is there to take it as needed. And so I would definitely say that's one thing that we also practice.
A lot of preparation, and I know every entity isn't going to have an opportunity to have that level of detail or preparation. It may not be feasible. It may not be with the size of your organization, multitasking to other folks. It may not be there. But if I was an entity, I would probably try to reach out to somebody who maybe has those resources to see if maybe we can share some of those resources. If you have some literature, some material that can help my SMEs prepare for it, share it. That's an opportunity to collaborate there. So we'll stay a little bit on the topic with requests. Talk a little bit about RFIs or data requests. If you hear me say data request or RFI, they are synonymous with one another. One is for CDMS, one is for Align. And we're not taking any Align questions today. What happens, Maite, when you receive a request for information? What's the process that you go through?
So our setup typically for, once we initiate the audit, we turn that switch on, right? We actually set up a war room for our compliance team and our internal audit group. And so we've got some screens projected throughout. We've prepared a good war, a friendly war, of course, right? No casualties and no PNCs, we hope. So we have an RFI tracker. There's always a fortunate member of the team that gets a limited or no scope assigned to them. And so we assign them as our RFI scribe, to keep them a little busy, right? And aside from a support role, we track the relevant RFI information onto a document to ensure we can all see what's transpiring, what's in the queue. We identify the business units, the primary SMEs, and we ensure we interpret and understand the request. Ask for clarification as needed, and we assign it. We transfer it to an RFI template that we've created internally just for consistency. And we request that response be returned to us prior to the WECC deadline. So we have some time to modify, review as a group, and we send it over to WECC, obviously prior to or before the due date, update our RFI tracker, and save the actual documentation in our repository.
I like the tracking system that you have there. And one of the assumptions in this question, when I asked you this question, the assumption was that RFI had all of the information that you needed contained within. And it wasn't one of those simple, provide me a diagram of what. So kind of along that line, Stephanie, if you received an RFI that needs additional clarification, because it does happen from time to time, can you describe what it is that you would do to seek clarification on that RFI?
Yeah, sure. So as I kind of mentioned before, we're not really shy about reaching out. And I think that's kind of key for us, right? If we don't feel like we fully understand what the ask is, we're just going to reach out to our audit lead and say, hey, can you give a little bit more clarity around this? Or this is what we think you're wanting. Can you confirm that? So we kind of try to keep that open line of communication to make sure we understand what is being asked before we go down the path of pulling in all of the SMEs and everybody else who needs to kind of, look at it and get a response together, because it does us no good to spin the wheels if we're answering the wrong thing.
I agree, and that's why I wanted to ask this question of, could there be additional clarification? Yes, we need to ask for it. We, as auditors, need to provide better information. We need to be more clear in our request to you. The more vague it is, the more that we're going to have a back and forth. You could submit a response based on your interpretation of what we're looking for, but that might not be what we're looking for. And then we have another RFI and another RFI, and it just keeps going down. And then finally, it's like, can we just have a quick call to settle this up? And that quick call is, oh, you wanted a one-line diagram for this substation. You should have just asked for it. Yeah, we tried, but we got to get better. We got to get better at that. And that's why I'm saying this is not just what's gone good and bad. It's how do we prevent this? And how do we prevent those key preparation items that the organizations are doing to provide a response? How do we keep those things in sync to get the resolution that we're looking for or the document that we need? So Mike, I want to follow up on your response and ask another question about preparation. Kind of prefaced it with, sometimes we miss the mark, but what additional information can WECC provide in an interview request that will help you with your preparation?
I mean, I'm going to say it. I definitely think we welcome the interview questions, of course, right? I mean, we can't get any better prepared than that. Obviously, if that's not possible, if you can provide us a targeted business unit, I mean, some plans, documentation, and standards apply to different business units. So if you can identify those so we know which primary SMEs have to be in the room, that would definitely allow us to be in a better position. Perhaps even providing a little more detailed information or a screenshot, if you will, if there's an issue that was identified, and if you can just provide a little more detail so we're better prepared, and perhaps in multiple choice format for interview questions. I mean, that would be great.
I wonder if there's a situation we could do that. Maybe this is where the creative juices start flowing. Tino, we're going to try this. We're going to pilot this program. Over the last 3 to 4 years, I think we've worked diligently to improve the quality of our requests for information and interviews. I think we've put some quality work into it, and we still have a lot of room for improvement. And I think with your help, this can be something that we solve together. So we're making audits more efficient, making them flow smoothly. I attribute a lot of this innovation to the COVID pandemic. We had a lot of time to get creative with our requests for information. We were unable to see things on site, and so we tried to do a lot of detailed requests that would help fill that void. This led to a lot of internal collaboration from us to develop a more comprehensive approach to documenting our requests. We're trying to include document names, document titles, index numbers for sampled assets on the ERT of the O&P evidence spreadsheet. We're trying to make sure that we're giving you that information there. My hope is that you've noticed this over the last 2 to 3 years. I'm hoping that you've seen it, and we want to have an opportunity for you to continue to provide us feedback. If you get a data request or an RFI or an interview request that is not clear, please reach out to the audit team lead or the CPC and ask for clarification, ask for additional details. We want to deliver that value-added product that is going to satisfy what everybody needs. We need your help, and we ask for it in multiple ways, but it's important that we get this right. Detailed, logical, and thorough requests for interview and informations will help prevent these ugly situations from occurring. But it goes both ways. It goes both ways. I said I would call everybody out. We wouldn't have as many RFIs or data requests if some of the compliance narratives gave us a little bit more meat on the bone. So those compliance boxes that used to be in RSOLs that were bright green, where you type your compliance narrative, you map the documents and let us know how you're achieving the compliance objectives, the security objectives, or developing internal controls. The more detailed that is, the better it's going to help us understand your processes and your programs. one of the key questions that we ask at the beginning, actually, let me ask this. Does anybody know the first question that we ask in an interview? It's not templated, but it's, hmm? What time is lunch? The first question we ask is, can you walk us through your program? And you may ask, why do I need to walk you through the program when I gave you this nice green compliance narrative, or you put it in a line now? We're not going to talk about a line. I hit the button. We told you everything already. We've already given you all of this information. Yes, thank you. I've read it. I've interpreted it. Doesn't mean it's fact. This is where your subject matter experts may come forth with some of that tribal knowledge that are really good controls, or they may have that detailed process where Molly was talking about baking the cookies. Your subject matter experts are the ones that have the recipe for this. That's the folks that we want to have the conversation with. We want to make sure that the detail that we're sharing in these requests demonstrate a commitment to reliability and security. Now, I do agree that we have the opportunity to get better, but there's one thing that you said that stuck out to me that I'm a little nervous to ask. I think you were a little bit nervous to provide a response to when we were preparing, but I'm going to ask it anyway. There's differences between auditors, and those differences sometimes show up in interviews. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and how consistency between auditors can facilitate a more collaborative interview?
You read it well. I don't think I realized I was speaking out loud when I said that comment, and I couldn't take it back. So now I'm here. But yeah, I realize there's no one size fits all, right? And depending on the scope, depending on the evidence that was provided and the evidence that wasn't provided, you know, how the interview responses go, it's going to be somewhat different. I believe maybe consistent format out the floodgates. I mean, perfect example, tell me about your plan, your process, your documentation. Just having those structured basic questions, I think, would definitely position the entity a lot better to provide a more consistent, concise response and potentially save interview time.
I think we should have more interview time. I like spending time with you guys. Stephanie, Maite brought up some points about consistency. What about from an entity's perspective?
Yeah, so I would say this last audit we had showed the most consistency we've seen. I think previous audits, it felt like two audits. We had a SIP audit and we had an O&P audit. We definitely saw a difference this last time. It felt the most similar I think it ever has. And I feel like we were able to prepare our SMEs in the same ways. We, you know, kind of had similar dialogue. It was nice having one singular contact, you know, that kind of provided some consistency on that end. So I would say that our recent engagement was very consistent. So kudos to that, because previously I would say there were big differences in the way the auditors, came on and asked questions and what they wanted to know. So much better than it has been.
So I want to build on that a little bit and give some significant kudos here to Deb and the entity monitoring staff. We recently restructured into the pods, and we combined two distinct disciplines between SIP and O&P into one team. And so that's two different processes into one team. That can be difficult to navigate, and there could be challenges that are associated with that to make sure that one group is doing stuff similarly to the other group. Throughout this process, we've not piloted. I think we're past the pilot phase and we're probably full steam ahead, where most audits are going to have a single ATL. You're going to have one point of contact that will help facilitate the audit perspectives, from wrangling up the SIP SMEs and the operations and planning SMEs and making sure that they're providing you that value added engagement. So we're going to kind of remove that silo of there's one O&P and there's one SIP. Now it's three teams with a combined practice. So that's some of the efforts that WECC has put through. And I want to talk through a couple of different ones. Consistency with ATLs. we're huge proponents of building the relationships, but you can't build a relationship that's lasting and sustaining if we're constantly rotating the ATLs that have worked really hard to build that. So one of the efforts that we're doing is trying to ATL for the same entities. It's not that we don't want to diversify that or introduce you to other auditors or other audit team leads, but it helps build that relationship. It's been 2 audits with APS. It's been a spot check plus 2 audits with EPE. I've got to know the staff. I feel comfortable with them. And I want other ATLs to feel that. And I think we're seeing that consistency is helping with that. Some things that we're doing, auditor interactions. We've gone through, we've done some internal training on how to better prepare and deliver an interview, as well as how do we ask questions or craft questions so we're eliciting the appropriate responses. Not necessarily the right or wrong responses, but what are we trying to get from the question we're asking? We're not dancing around a specific topic. Transparency, new auditors. We have new auditors that come through. We also have observers. We had a, to my taste point, where we had a little consistency. We don't want to call out an auditor for not being consistent with another auditor, but how do we know that that auditor is going to give you the same level of service, customer service, if you will, during an audit if they're not trained in the same manner? So we've done some observations, some left seat, right seat type stuff, similar with ATLs. ATLs are starting to do that. You're going to start to see some new ATLs come through because they've observed multiple audits, or they've been an understudy. I use that word quite often. They've been an understudy and they've learned how to be ATLs. So we're not just throwing you a fresh ATL, fresh out of NERC's class with a certificate saying they're good to go. We're going to give them some training so they can handle some of those situations. We've created pre-audit meetings with the WECC risk team to review internal controls or maybe some control objectives or some questions that we'd like to identify and answer through risk. We do post-audit meetings with the risk team where we have a debrief on the findings and additional risk areas, risk mitigation. We talk about the culture of compliance. We talk about our internal processes, what worked, what didn't work. We incorporated a couple of years ago a post-audit call. We talked about that earlier in the conference here, where we get to meet with the entity and follow up, not check in. It's following up. How can we be of more service to look at those recommendations, areas of concerns, and positive observations? And lastly, we're talking about some outreach. This is an opportunity for us to continue that discussion beyond an audit so we continuously build those positive relationships. We talk about some challenges, and this is just going to be some bullet points. What could lead to ugly audits? Because there are no examples. None. Turnover can be on both internally and externally. If we're seeing significant turnover at an entity, there may be some problems with some of those processes because they're not familiar with it, or they're not familiar with the processes because they don't do that on a regular basis, or they just walked into that role. Or from a WECC perspective, maybe they're coming from an entity side saying, look at my recommendation here. This is what we would do at my entity. This is what my former entity. This is what we would do. We're sharing those pieces, but we want to make sure that we're cognizant of the turnover and we're implementing those internal controls from an audit perspective to prepare auditees for those interviews and prepare auditors to deliver that value-added audit. There could be a struggle for clarity at both WECC and the entity. We need to ensure that there's alignment. We need to have those conversations, and sometimes those can be difficult conversations. If we have to have them, we have them professionally. And at the end of the day, we realize that it's for the betterment of the bulk electric system. We need to make sure that the requests, the detailed requests are populated in a manner that we're asking for the information we need. And we want to be able to provide some actionable feedback. If you notice the recommendations and areas of concern have really improved instead of being a one-liner, such as align your operational practices with your documented processes. Remember those recommendations? Didn't tell you anything. But if we said, align your operational practice to secure facilities before leaving and put that in your documentation, now we're giving you a little bit more meat on the bones of what that recommendation is. Another struggle could be some misinterpretations or some unknowns. And I think we touched a little bit on that, and I asked the volatile question to Molly of what happens with those internal controls after you review them? And that's an unknown. That could lead to something that's ugly if you don't know all of that work that you put in. And I think Nexera talked about it was like $1 million preparing for an audit. That's a lot. If you're putting in all of those efforts and the steps are unclear of what happens post-audit, we didn't do you a great service. So I think we need to evaluate ourselves there of what we can provide that's a little bit more beneficial to both. And I want to talk about conflicts and conflict mediation. We don't typically see this. It's navigating difficult conversations as well. If there's a potential noncompliance, it ruins my day to say that there's a potential noncompliance. And it probably ruins yours to hear that. But at the end of the day, it's an opportunity for us to get better together. And if you ever wonder why I have the big toy background on my wall with all the toys, if I have to deliver the bad news that there's a potential noncompliance, it's really hard for you to be mad if there's a bunch of toys in the background. We also need to navigate who's the appropriate person to talk to when it comes to a potential noncompliance, an area of concern, or a recommendation. If we tell a subject matter expert during an interview, here's you got a PNC, they're probably going to get defensive and they're probably going to be upset. So who's the appropriate personnel that we need to have those conversations with? And lastly, I want to talk, this is a very light topic and I want to tread carefully here. Language and dialect barriers. There is an opportunity that we're going to come in contact with somebody that has a different dialect or speaks a different language, and we're trying to have a technical conversation. That can be very difficult. I know that we need to, first and foremost, we're avoiding any kind of discrimination. But we want to talk with the primary contact, or if the primary contact knows that there's somebody that has a different dialect and it is a little difficult, have those conversations with the audit team lead to identify some different approaches or avenues to where we can still have a viable discussion. And that may just be submitting an RFI with those questions in advance. I hope everybody doesn't have a language barrier after I said that, but sorry, Deb, messed that one up. But I think if we get back to it, if we identify potential concerns or things that could lead to a bad or an ugly situation, we need to navigate those things together. We talked about rush. I think, David, you said it earlier. We need to make sure that we don't have any draconian due dates. We need to be cognizant of when we're asking for that. There's times it can't be avoided. We have a last minute Hail Mary RFI asking for something that could determine whether this is a potential non-compliance or no finding. Sometimes those happen, but we need to have those conversations well in advance. And again, it's part of that collaboration. It's part of that trust. If we didn't have the trust to establish those discussion points well in advance, it's probably not going to happen when things start getting a little dicey or we're mid-audit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about preparation. Stephanie, this is going to be a great example for you. We've had an opportunity to work together on the last 2 audits over the last 5 years. When APS decides that you're going to be the next CEO, what advice would you give the next PCC that steps in your role?
Well, first of all, I'm having way too much fun doing audits with you. So, I mean, I got to stay right where I'm at, right? No. Said no one ever, but that's okay. Just kidding, Josh. I think that any advice I would pass on would be to get involved. Don't be hesitant or afraid. I am naturally an introvert. So, kind of putting myself out there, going to a dine around with Josh for the first time or with Tom or Deb or whoever it is, that's not really my natural state, but I feel very welcomed. And so that helps. So my biggest piece of advice is to don't hold back. Just jump on in there. There's going to be a million things you don't know, and that's okay. That's why we're all here kind of in the game together. Lean on your peers, the people who are here, ask questions. Don't expect to know everything right up front because you're not. I still just, there's a million things I still don't know. And use those resources that are out there. I was mentioning yesterday to someone, I appreciated WECC's presentation yesterday where they talked about what they do other than audits, because we talk so much about audits. And the first thing you think of when you hear WECC is audit. And there's a million other things that WECC is doing. There's a ton of resources out there on their site. There's people who are willing to talk to you. And I think if we can, so that's, I would just say, take the approach that it's a partnership. And I think that would be the best piece of advice I could give anyone.
Thank you. I won't take that joke personal. Many of you have probably heard me say in an interview, how do you ensure this information is documented? So when you get hit by the lottery bus, the next person can continue performing those compliance activities. Same goes internally for us at WECC. We've been working to prepare for these same types of circumstances. Hopefully I'm the beneficiary of the lottery, but if I'm not, I want to make sure that we're prepared. We're working to ensure consistency amongst the ATLs and the auditors. What helps us is your feedback. We want to know what we're doing well, what we can do better. I know tomorrow you're going to have conversations as WIC, and you're going to debrief on a lot of audits. You'll talk amongst each other what your audit experience was like, how it differed from somebody else's audit experience. That's great. It's great to have those conversations, but can you provide us with the constructive feedback of what can we do better, and maybe provide us some examples as well. Let us know if the interview requests are looking poor. Show us what a good one looks like. Give me an example of what it is that you'd like to see. And please, please, please fill out that audit feedback survey. I say it's my favorite slide. I say it for a reason. Every Thursday, Deb holds a meeting, or Wednesday, she holds a meeting. We talk about audit feedback. Maybe it's Thursday. We talk about audit feedback. And I'm always like, what are they going to say? What are they going to say? We got no feedback. Okay, let's try it again. Please, this is an opportunity. It's not just how well did the audit go? How knowledgeable were the auditors? This is a great opportunity to provide us that feedback. Let us know. We truly want to get better. We can sit in our innovative boxes as much as possible and try to be innovative, but if it doesn't solve a problem for you, then it's only a solution that's going to benefit the very few internally. Please, please, please fill that out. I know we're coming up on time. I want to open it up for audience questions, but Maite, I want to ask you one more question. What is the most memorable moment from your most recent audit engagement or spot check?
I think I enjoyed the site visit, the audit in the field the most. It got us out of our war room, right, for staying into the battlefield. The walkthroughs went really well. The collaboration flowed. We even took some selfies when we were done, headed out to lunch, and so that was nice. We made it fun. It was very personable. And as we were closing out the audit, contextually, we had a PNC on the radar. And so that part, not so much fun, but definitely memorable. I mean, I would be amiss to say that it wasn't being my first audit engagement. And so we were fortunate enough to regroup. We essentially performed an interview internally. We gathered additional information. We got our SMEs together, and we threw that Hail Mary response to WECC for consideration. And we were fortunate enough to move that PNC to an AOC. And so that definitely sealed the deal as a memorable moment for my first audit engagement.
It was a Hail Mary. We actually had it in the closing presentation.
We scored.
We had it in the closing presentation. And there was a last minute one. And it doesn't happen often, but there was an opportunity where there was a missed question in a request for information. If we would have asked the question a better way, or asked for a specific document in a better way, we would have received it, and we would have never had a discussion of potential noncompliance. So what we did was we sent the organization home thinking that there was a potential noncompliance. They're briefing their upper level management at the end of the day, and their transmission folks are like, we got this document. What are you talking about? And they presented it to us, and we were able to review it in enough time, and there wasn't a potential noncompliance. So it was an opportunity like that to where there was enough trust in the process going forward that the organization said, you know what, we want to have a conversation on Friday morning before this closing presentation and present one more thing. Thankfully, all of the stars aligned and we were able to do that. But I don't think we would have had that trust in the process if we didn't build those relationships over the years. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to be the ATL, not just for El Paso Electric, APS, but the other entities. And I'll speak on behalf of the audit team leads that have done the same thing. We appreciate the collaboration. We appreciate the discussion. We understand we both have jobs that we have to do. One of them is a regulator, one of them is implementation and making sure that the grid actually does what it's supposed to do. We can't do one without the other, and if we try to, we're going to fail. So I ask, and I kind of call upon all of us here, just to better that collaboration, have those positive discussions, the good communications, and believe in the process. We're in this together. Our success is your success, and our success is making sure that the lights stay on. So that is all I have for you guys today. Stephanie and Maite, thank you so much. Hopefully the questions weren't too difficult. Audience participation, you were great. Any questions, we can field them. We have 2 minutes, and Heidi, I'll answer your question. I said 4 times. It was 5? Oh, man. Okay. Tuned out at 3? Okay. Well, thank you, folks. I appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of you. I look forward to the next one, and I'll turn it over to Deb.